The 14-year-old in me is giggling like a schoolgirl. Okay, that was a terribly worded sentence. I could have said that a lot better. Ay, ay, ay. If you had told me in 2014 that we would be talking about this player, and that this player would have accomplished the things that he had accomplished at the NHL level, I would have been ecstatic. Forget going over the moon. I would have been over one of Saturn's moons. I would have been completely jumping up and down, super stoked, super thrilled, because if we learned in 2015 that this player would have been this good, I would have been the happiest Canucks fan on the planet. It's just, you would also need to tell me that the player we are talking about has been so good, but not for the Vancouver Canucks. He has been good almost everywhere else. But what if I told you that this former Vancouver Canucks top draft pick, a guy whom he said himself he feels the Vancouver Canucks gave up on him, and a guy who could potentially be on the block, what if I told you that there was maybe, a chance he could get traded back to Vancouver? Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to turn your attention to the fourth period's 2025 Summer Trade Watch list, posted by David Pagnotta, and garnering up a storm with all of its links to NHL teams and various NHL players. And I wanted to talk about the guy who was listed on this trade list at number 15. He plays for the Seattle Kraken as a left wing, and he's making $5 million a year. It is none other, you know it from the title and the thumbnail, than Jared McCann. Left wing, Seattle Kraken, with 2 more years left on his contract, McCann is an attractive ad for teams looking to add more scoring punch in their lineup. He has a 10-team no-trade list and has some say in where he winds up if the Kraken decide to trade him. Teams reportedly linked to Jared McCann are the Vancouver Canucks, the Ottawa Senators, and the New York Rangers. Now, again, Jared McCann is a guy that I think a lot of Canucks fans feel a lot of buyer's remorse towards. I certainly do. McCann was a former top prospect for the Vancouver Canucks, initially drafted by the team in 2014, 24th overall. And he was a guy who, back when he was drafted, there was this sort of idea that he was more of a two-way finesse guy with a scoring touch. Jared McCann himself, I remember in like 2014, something like that, after the prospect showcase during the season ticket holders press conference open Q&A, Jared McCann said that he modeled his game after Ryan Kesler, to which a lot of Canucks fans went out there and booed immediately, because at that point Kesler was just recently traded. It was a tough, sensitive subject for Canucks fans in that time frame. That was 10 years ago, and I remember that. Playing for the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, Jared McCann was a two-way center, a light guy, but still a very productive, goal-scoring, point-producing guy who inevitably found himself in Vancouver in 2015-16, posting up 18 points in 69 games played. He wasn't great, and in the words of McCann himself via a podcast here and there, he went out there and spoke about how he felt the Vancouver Canucks may have given up on him a little bit too early. If you recall, Jared McCann was traded to Florida in the ever-so-ill-fated Eric Goodbranson trade, a trade so old but not old enough that you actually can find a YouTube video that we made about it back when it went down. I remember jumping up and down in my living room, freaking out, saying, "Oh my gosh, the Canucks just traded Jared McCann!" And then we made a video about it, and you can see the crappy thumbnail here. Oh, talk about an eyesore, even though the videos still kind of use a similar thumbnail style nowadays. Oh, Lego, why don't you change it? It's because this is the branding. Everybody knows our videos. They look like this. But back then, this is what it looked like, and that was 9 years ago. Anyways, Jared McCann, the Canucks, they gave up on him. He went to Florida. He was okay there. He went to Pittsburgh. He was a little bit better there. He was sent over to Toronto. He didn't even play there. He got lost in the expansion draft. And then in 4 seasons with the Seattle Kraken, Jared McCann literally cemented himself as the top-scoring Kraken player of all time. He's coming off a 61-point campaign in 82 games played, which is 2 years removed from a 70-point campaign in 79 games played, which included 40 goals. Jared McCann, at 29 years old, has really found his way as an NHL stud. Maybe not necessarily the best of the best, he is not a franchise talent, but he's like top 6 borderline elite on most teams, you can say. And because he was the second of 2 Vancouver Canucks first-round picks taken in 2014, the other one, of course, being Jake Virtanen, who didn't amount to anything either for Vancouver, there is a lot of buyer's remorse for a lot of Canucks fans analyzing this area of the Canucks draft history. Of course, we recognize they drafted Thatcher Demko in 2014, and that was pretty good. They got Besser the next year after that, and then Guillaume Brisebois also in that area. Olli Juolevi we're never going to talk about again, and then they got Pettersson and Hughes. So that's kind of the Canucks fan response, I would say, to draft picks in the past decade. But Jared McCann is in an interesting spot in Seattle because now the Kraken were already reported to have gotten calls on McCann earlier in the year. His contract's really good, $5 million, and he's got just 2 years left on it. This is a very sustainable player with a really reasonable cap hit and a production rate that allows him to be a top 6 contributor on most NHL teams. He can score, he can make plays, he can play defensively, he can play on the wing where he allows himself to utilize more of his offensive touch, he can play down the middle where he's a little bit more responsible two-way. Jared McCann has gotten a little bit heavier over the years. He's at 185 right now, so he certainly isn't still that small, light kid getting shoved around like he was in Vancouver in 2015-16. That was a decade ago, man. Crazy. If the Seattle Kraken are in a position where they want to get younger, they want to focus more on the Wrights and the Kakos and the Meniers instead of the guys who are a little bit higher up there, if they want to capitalize on Jared McCann's in-the-now presence as an NHL product, they could potentially trade this guy for some futures. And the Vancouver Canucks being one of the teams linked to McCann is just such a match made in heaven here. Not because, like, oh yeah, he's a former Canuck, let's get Bo Horvat and Jared McCann back to Vancouver. Not that that would be a bad thing. I think they'd be very good players on this current Vancouver Canucks squad. But when you consider what the Canucks need, what kind of assets they are on the hunt for, what kind of goal-scoring, point-producing, winger-caliber players they can add to their team, this is where you start to say, yeah, no, that's a guy that could be a perfect fit. McCann with Pettersson, how does that sound? The price might have to be something a little bit steep. Maybe the Canucks shell away one of those top young prospects that they've got, a Lekaramaki, a Valander, plus the 15th overall pick. If the Canucks are able to make out like bandits and they get Marco Rossi and McCann, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you're really starting to build this team in a way that I think is great. Screw JT Miller and Bo Horvat, let's get McCann and Rossi. Build for the future here, folks. And I say build for the future like Jared McCann is not in the same age range as Bo Horvat. But ultimately, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the Vancouver Canucks being linked to Jared McCann of the Seattle Kraken on David Pagnotta's 4th period NHL trade watch board? Do you think this is a good fit? What do you think the price would be for a McCann? And if you're a Canucks fan, would you be willing to pay that price? Simple question, not so simple answer. Let me know in the comment section, how do you feel? I hope you enjoyed this Vinicius Rolls 9, and bye.